Mike Owens here, and today I'm joined by Gillian the Savage Robertson, who's back in action on the 17th of September, facing Mariya Agapova. Gillian, great to sit down and chat. How are things with you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. 4 weeks out now. Well, I guess like three and a half now. So I'm super excited. It's like it's getting down to it. I'm just really excited to get back in there. I feel like it's gonna be a new me in there. So I'm ready to show that.
What point in fight camp or fight preparation are you most excited for the fight? Is there a particular point where you're like, this is it now, this is where I'm at my maximum excitement?
I feel like every camp's different, and also I feel like I don't know, it can be like a roller coaster sometimes. Like one day I'll be like I'm on top of the world, I had great sparring, and the next day I'll go in and I'll go with like some of the boys who are a lot better than me and get kind of manhandled and not be able to pull anything off that day and then feel absolutely terrible. So I'm like, I feel like you can go through the motions, but you just gotta just keep on the like focus on your love for the sport and keep on and focus on that, and it makes it a lot easier.
Of course. You talked then about you feel like the world's going to see a new you come the 17th. Can you give me a little bit of a insight into why you feel that is the case and what kind of changes you've maybe made?
So I started training at a new gym. Previously, I was just working with my head coach, Dean Thomas, and I'm still working with him, but just not as often. We're working together about 2 to 3 times a week, and I'm working at the Goat Shed down in Miami now currently. And I've honestly just seen a completely different fighter in myself. I feel like I'm going live a lot more. I'm getting a lot more creative. I just have a lot of different looks, a lot of different bodies, and a lot of different minds now that are all collaborating together. And I really have a team behind me. And I feel like, yeah, I've never been this excited to fight. I feel like I just really want to be able to put all the skills that I've learned on display.
How important for a fighter for still a developing fighter, you're still in your mid 20s, so still a developing fighter in terms of your skill set. How important is it to get new bodies, to get as many rounds in with as many different styles and as many different sparring partners as possible? How important is that for you?
Oh, well, you have to be ready for anything. You have to, it's like even Mariya Agapova, she's an awkward southpaw. It's like to find a look like that and to get ready for someone like that, it's a very unique look. So I'm lucky to have a huge team that we can find somebody who can kind of play that part. And I feel like even like things like that, it's just like little things that you don't really think about that make such a huge deal.
100%. You mentioned there being ready for everything, and that was one of the points I wanted to touch on because you were actually scheduled to book, originally scheduled to fight Agapova. You were originally scheduled to fight Melissa Gatto. Now, I can't quite find out on the internet why Gatto pulled out from the fight, but it just seems to say undisclosed reasons. Do you have any inkling about why Gatto was pulled from the bout, and how quickly was the turnaround for the new opponent in Agapova?
Uh, I believe that I was told it was injury. I
Right, okay,
didn't push further on that.
of course.
So, yeah, that's all I got. But I want to say it was like literally right after. Like, I want to say Mick texted, Dean's usually the one who does all my negotiating for me. So Mick texted Dean and said, Melissa out, like, Mariya Agapova, do you want it? Like, in the same text. Like, they were ready for it.
Mm.
And that's why I'm lucky to work with the UFC. I'm like, everything's so professional, and to get an opponent and to be able to get somebody like that just turned right around, it's super awesome, and I'm super excited.
So how long have you known about this fight? How long is kind of training camp for Agapova, if you like?
I'm not sure now. Melissa Gatto, when I signed my initial contract, I actually had one fight. I had another fight before that too that fell through. I can't even remember her name now, but there was another girl. It wasn't even released yet. I signed a
Mm.
contract, then she got injured, and then I got the Melissa Gatto fight, and then she got injured, and then Agapova. But I believe it was 16 weeks at the beginning of that. So it's been an extremely long camp, but just getting ready for anything.
So 16 weeks seems like an awfully long time to have an opponent, a name in mind. Is that almost too long for a camp in some ways?
Well, definitely too long for a camp for
Yeah.
me. And I'm like, I guess that's where I'm lucky. I haven't had one name in mind.
Mm.
I've got a lot. I've had the girls fall out, so I've had different people to think about. But yeah, I feel like with the UFC, I don't know what my luck is. It's either I've had fights 16-week camps or 2 week camps, and I
Mm.
feel like there's no in between. I'm never getting like I feel like for me, an ideal camp would be 4 or 5 weeks just to get me really in peak condition and ready to go. But I'm happy to have so much time, especially that I was starting with a new team, just so we could really get acclimated to each other and I could really get used to hearing another coach in my corner.
100%. If we touch on Agapova as an opponent, what does she kind of do well? What are her key kind of strengths and attributes when you look at her as an upcoming style matchup?
She's Agapova and I actually worked together for like 3 or 4 months at ATT, and she's like I said, a very awkward southpaw, and it's almost because she has such an awkward style, it's hard to deal with. So her strikes and her kicks come out from weird angles, and it's sometimes really unpredictable. But I think the obvious victory for me here is on the ground. She's I feel like it's just technically I win that battle.
Obviously, you've predominantly, I don't want to say predominantly being a ground fighter, but you've shown a lot of prowess in the grappling department throughout your UFC tenure. Is there anybody in your division that you wouldn't want to go to the ground with, that you go, do you know what, I want to keep this standing and try and outstrike it with them? Or is to a certain extent, it's always going to be a part of your game plan to take it to the ground at some point?
I feel like I at least threaten the takedown no matter what. I There's some girls that maybe I would want to get them tired before we are going to the ground. So I'd take them down, let them get back up a little bit and work that more, the wrestling portion, and then we could go to jiu-jitsu. But no matter what, the ground's definitely my world. And I honestly just want to be able to display my strikes better on the ground.
100%. Agapova is a bit of a strange one in many ways because she came in with quite a lot of hype to the UFC. I can distinctly remember her debut against, I think it was Hannah Cyphers. She kind of came in, and I remember the conversation after that fight being, this is the new JJ, this is the replacement for Joanna and JJ. But she's had some kind of stumbles throughout the UFC. Her record's currently 2-2. So you've got a little bit of tape on the win on when she's won and a little bit of tape on when she's lost. So what have you kind of made of her UFC tenure so far?
I feel like she tends to come out strong and hard, at least at the beginning of her fight with Cyphers and with Dobson. She came out extremely fast, a little bit more patient in her more recent fights, but in her 2 first fights where she did come out too fast, she kind of gassed herself in that. And I feel like it's shown in the fights that how our styles will match up, how my jiu-jitsu will match up against hers.
100%. She's obviously coming off the loss, quite a high-profile loss against Marina Moroz, in what was kind of billed as a rival fight. There was a kind of a bit of a tension there, I think, in a similar vein to what you're saying about having trained together. I think there was a similar debate, if you like, over who maybe got the better in the training room. Have you ever had a rival fight? Have you ever kind of had any similar situations of that, or maybe not a rival fight, but an opponent that you've kind of distinctly disliked? Is there any kind of instances that are similar to that in your career, perhaps?
Um, I don't know. I guess not really. I'm not really the like shit talker, the one to start something, or um I don't even think I've had any opponents talk shit. Like nobody's really like started anything, or I feel like everybody's come in respectful, and I don't think you really see that as much in female mixed martial arts. I don't know. I think you see it a lot in male mixed martial arts for like obviously like the Conor McGregors and Nate Diaz is always talking shit, but yeah, I don't know. All my opponents have been respectful, and most of them are friends with me after we fight too.
Okay, then. So pound for pound, who is the best women's shit talker in MMA?
Hmm. I have to really think about that. I'm like, I don't even know any, like, I don't know. I can't even think of one that is really the, hmm. I can't really think of a woman that like really does it.
The only one that come to mind for me when I asked you that question would be Joanna. But I know obviously she's now retired, but she at one point when she was the boogie woman, as she called herself, that's probably the obvious pick, I suppose.
Oh yeah, no, you're 100% right about that. There's one moment whenever Carla's standing there with the belt and she's holding up like number 1, and Joanna's like, "No, put that down. Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, I thought that was the most gangster thing.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. You mentioned there about obviously having spent some time with your upcoming opponent in the training room. I'm not going to ask the obvious question of how did it go. That's too, simplistic if you like. But What is it like going into a scenario when you have had them rounds in the gym with your upcoming opponent, when you know her style, but ultimately she knows a little bit about you too?
Honestly, this is my first time this has ever happened, so it's a new experience for me on its own. But and everybody performs different than they fight in the gym. There's a lot of people known as like gym warriors who
Mm.
like they there's some girls that I can tell you that they would beat me every single day in the gym, and then you watch them fight and you're like, who is that? Like, they don't go out there and perform. The pressure gets to them, the big lights get to them, the weight cut gets to them. There's a lot of things that are different in the cage scenario than what happens in the gym. So it's a completely different scene. So I really don't think you can base it off of what you guys did in the gym.
Of course, 100%. And kind of speaking about this is something I wanted to bring up because it feels like you've been in the UFC kind of forever. I actually checked the record. If memory serves, you joined the UFC at 22.
Yes, correct.
22 years of age is crazy young to join, the premier organization in the sport. And obviously, you've alternated wins and losses throughout your UFC career, but to a certain extent, have you almost had to learn on the job? And maybe would it be fair to say you maybe joined the UFC ranks a little bit too early?
I think that's 100% fair to say. Like, I was 3-2 when I got signed to the UFC, and it's like it's the top organization in the world. You don't have an opportunity to make any kind of mistakes. And like you said, I was learning on the job. So any type of little mistake that I made, these girls are capitalizing on it and taking advantage of it. Where it's like if I made some of these mistakes on the regional scene and I was able to learn a little bit better with not as experienced opponents, I probably wouldn't have suffered those losses. But yeah, I wish I had a little bit more professional experience before I got into the UFC. But also the fact that I did get into the UFC so young has made it so I've been able to focus on training since I was 22 years old. So I've been 100% just focused on being in the gym since then.
Yeah, 100%. And kind of if we go back to your early UFC career, I've got to talk about the Molly McCann win because in case you couldn't recognise, I have a very similar accent to Molly, being from Liverpool, obviously a city that you fought in all those years ago. Molly's obviously went on and had her own career and had a lot of success post your win. But kind of in retrospect, how big of a scalp do you think Molly's name is on your resume, given what she's now doing in her career?
No, I think that's a huge thing on my resume to have Molly McCann. I think she's like obviously the tear that she's been on lately, and she's a very impressive opponent. Honestly, probably one of the fights that I was most nervous for going in.
Mm.
I she was it wasn't my UFC debut, but it pretty much was to me. My UFC debut, it was for the tough finale.
Yeah.
So I was still wearing like the Justin Gaethje colors. I didn't get my own fight kit. I didn't get like a Reebok bag.
Mm.
So really the Molly McCann fight felt like my UFC debut. It was her UFC debut as well. She was the Cage Warriors champ. It was in Liverpool, her hometown. I'm going in there getting booed the whole time. So probably the most nervous, and obviously Molly McCann, who she was 7-2 when we fought.
Yeah.
So very good record, and she was just putting girls away. So probably one of the fights I was the most nervous for, and probably one of I would say definitely the girl that I fought in the UFC that I'm the closest with now.
Are you and Molly still close? Is there still a relationship there?
Oh yeah, I believe it was sometime last year I was supposed to fight Miranda Maverick, and I ended up getting food poisoning the day of the fight. But that time Molly was actually supposed to corner me.
Oh, I do remember this story. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do remember that story. I guess what I wanted to ask because that's what martial art is all about, isn't it? Is respect after battle. What can you tell me about your experiences in Liverpool? I know you said you got booed in the arena, which is probably custom when you're fighting the hometown fighter. But what can you remember about that fight week and fighting in my city specifically?
So in like during fight week, I'm typically like cutting weight, focused on the fight. So I'm not really going out or doing much. But I remember after the fight, just my brother and we went out and we got a few drinks around town, and just the support from everybody after that, like everybody's like, "Oh, you choked out Meatball!" Everywhere I went, I've never gotten so much support after that.
Brilliant, brilliant. Good to hear. I wanted to very quickly touch on another subject, and this was kind of your activity throughout the pandemic, because I checked kind of post the start of the COVID pandemic. This is your seventh fight post pandemic, which I checked the record. You're one of, if not the most active fighter post pandemic. So how lucky do you think you've been to be able to stay so active throughout what has been quite, a difficult period for MMA and sport more generally?
That's great. I'm like, for me, I'm like, I don't feel like I've been active enough. Yeah, so that's a crazy stat to hear, but I'm super thankful for that. I want to be as active as possible, especially like I said, I just got really acclimated to my new team. We're ready to get things going. So I'm trying to really get back in there as soon as possible and just keep on getting fights back to back. Hopefully before the end of the year, get in the cage at least one more time.
100%. Your fifth fight in the Apex, as I mentioned, post COVID. Your record in the Apex is 2 wins and 2 losses. What have your kind of experiences been like in that quite intimate setting with no fan attendance and all of that, and the kind of the strange circumstances that surround the Apex? Do you think?
It's kind of like an awkward thing, almost like I don't. I thought I would react better to it because I don't necessarily like being in crowds. I don't like public speaking a lot, so I thought I would perform better without a crowd there. But I honestly love the energy of the crowd. I love having the fans there, and it almost feels like it's too relaxed of a scenario when there isn't a crowd there. And it's like it's something you really have to learn to acclimate yourself to. Like you need to really turn on that fight, because I feel like when the crowd's there, there's all that energy. It's so much easier to really get that energy going in the cage. But it's almost just too relaxed in the Apex.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. If we turn the conversation back to your career a little bit more specifically, Gillian, we're at the end of August 2022 now. I guess obviously the prime focus is getting the win over Agapova next month, of course. But what is your essential goals for the next 12-month period? What would you like to have accomplished by the end of August 2023?
That's a long time away. I'm like, I live fight to fight. Right now, we're just looking at Mariya Agapova. After that, I'm not really sure, honestly. I definitely want to fight before the end of the year. The big debate for me right now is my walking weight is a lot lower than it ever has been. So it's just a huge debate on the cut to 115 or not. I'm walking around like 130 right now. So I'm hardly even going to be cutting like once I start dieting, really, I'm going to be cutting like 2 pounds to get to 125. So, yeah, that's the debate for me right now. We might see an appearance at strawweight.
Well, that was a question I was going to ask, because I know you have had fought at strawweight. I think the last time you fought there was 2016. So there's obviously a worry that maybe you'd outgrown the division, but evidently not. But what would be the key strengths to go into strawweight would be obviously the size and strength advantage you would have over your opponents. What would be the key drawbacks, do you think, of making the move to 115?
The cut.
Of course, the cut.
I think it's the debate for me, because I know I'd be a very big strawweight, but I'm a very tiny flyweight. Actually, I did test with the UFC PI, and they said I ideally fit in the strawweight division, and I'm too small for a flyweight. So technically, I should be a strawweight. I guess for me, it's just like I want to make sure I can perform. I know that when I'm cutting a small amount of weight, I'm going out there and I'm performing my best. It feels like I'm in the gym. I feel great when I go out there. It feels like I feel like I have cut a lot of weight before. That's why I did move up to 125. I was walking around 140, and I just don't lift as much anymore, so I don't have as much muscle mass. So it's like I just feel better when I don't cut weight. I feel better when I'm close to the weight class. So that's the real big debate for me. But I know that these girls are cutting from, like, Agapova, when we were at ATT, she was walking around 150. So it's like I know she's gonna have a large amount of size on me in this fight, but it's also like, how much does that weight cut factor into how she fights? Is she not going to be as strong? Is she only going to be strong for one round? Is she going to gas out? It's like you really got to take into all the factors.
Of course. Well, only one person in the world can make that decision, and that is unfortunately you. So I will leave you with that decision, and I will leave you with the tantalizing thought of seeing you back in action on the 17th. So Thank you very much for your time. It was a fantastic conversation, and I look forward to seeing you back in action next month.
Oh, thank you so much. It was awesome.
Before we finish, Gillian, how can people find you on social media and any sponsors you'd like to plug? The floor is yours for the final word.
You can find me at savage_UFC on Twitter and Instagram, and just shout out to my coaches, Dean Thomas and Awesome, at the Goat Shed. You can follow them on Instagram too, and their page is a ton of fun. So yeah, that's it. Just watch me fight on September 17th.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKickMMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.